off the page. I'm Leslie Choice. My guest today is Judit Rajhathy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, she's a nutritionist and a health counselor and has lots of important things to say about our health and environment. Your book suggests that many of our health problems come from the environment we live in. How bad is it?
Well, it's becoming worse. The children and the grandchildren bear the brunt of this problem. But when I talk about environment, I talk about what we're eating, breathing, and drinking. So it's 3 levels of environment. And it also includes the exterior environment, the internal environment, and the indoor environment, like what's under your kitchen sink. You know, what are you cleaning your houses with? What are you cleaning your schools with? What's the air quality like? We really are canaries in the coal mine, especially the younger generation. I've tracked generations. So the older people, the senior citizens, tend to be healthier than their grandchildren.
Now that's pretty scary to me.
Yeah.
What is this thing called environmental illness? It's a very broad term, I know, but what does it technically mean?
Environmental illness basically is when one adversely reacts to items in their environment, whether it's what they're eating, drinking, or breathing. So, for example, an asthmatic, it can be food-related, it can be external environmentally related. There are many causes for each symptom, but from the perspective that I take in Free to Fly and also in my practice, I look at most of these things as symptoms like irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety. I always try to go to the cause of the cause of the cause. What's causing this problem, not just to placate it with medication.
Yeah, your doctor might go the easy route, perhaps, not every doctor, but say, okay, we'll treat it with this. You know, here's something that treats the symptom. Why is the medical profession really somewhat slow to recognize people suffering from environmental illness?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of just training, and the training is you have a symptom, we give you a medication. It's the quick fix. Unfortunately, with environmental illness or people who just chronically are not well, that's what I choose to talk about mainly, because when you think about environmental illness, people say, oh, that's not me. That's somebody else out there that's wearing a mask or that's exhibiting more symptoms. However, if people would pay attention to the body slowly not performing at peak performance, then they would know that they are also on their way to environmental illness. Again, environmental illness being whatever you're eating, breathing, and drinking that can be contributing to your level of wellness or unwellness.
What's a really easy way to take a first step in that direction? Someone has breathing problems or someone has something else.
Keeping a journal. Well, yeah, keeping a journal is really wonderful because then you become familiar with your body and it will definitely tell you. Chapter 6 of Free to Fly is basically an elimination process. So, for example, if you have breathing problems, then maybe looking at the environment. Okay, am I better indoors or outdoors? Am I worse when I'm eating dairy products? Well, the only way you're going to find that is to eliminate them for 10 days to 2 weeks. All of a sudden, wow, my breathing is better, I'm feeling better. Well, you can bet that that's part of, and maybe the whole reason for you having breathing problems. Definitely with bowel problems, it's food. What goes in must come out, and it's got to come out in the right way as well as it going in, so that anybody that says, you know, that any kind of irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's disease or whatever, that it's not, that there's no relationship with food is dreaming. There has to be a relationship.
Sounds logical to me. Now, in your book, you have a fictional character whose name is Jillian. Introduce us to her, if you would.
Jillian Stowe, the first line in the book is her doctor saying, I'm sorry, Jillian, there's nothing more I can do for you other than to send you to a psychiatrist. She is devastated because she knows she's physically ill. She's got chronic vaginal infection, she's got irritable bowel, she's got overweight problems. Almost every system in her body is not functioning properly. And yes, she has depression, and yes, she has mood swings and cognitive problems. She's driving down her own street and doesn't even know what street she's on. So in our culture, we would immediately say, or over a period of time when all the tests are negative, that it's time to see a psychiatrist. Well, she's devastated because she knows she's physically unwell, and just because they haven't found it doesn't mean that she's not physically ill. But she also has 3 kids, and Nathaniel, Max, and Emma, and she thinks they're healthy. They only have asthma, chronic ear infections, ADD, and in our culture, that's accepted as being the norm.
Wow. Are there many people like her out there?
Yes, there are. Most of the people we see in our clinic are definitely Jillian Stowe's. In fact, they come because they've read the book. But also, I speak to very large groups, and people have come up to me with tears in their eyes saying, this book has changed my life. And yes, there are a lot of Jillian Stowe's out there that are constantly making the rounds of trying to find out what is wrong, what's going on with me, why am I this way?
Now, yeah, when I read your book there, Free to Fly, I don't see you sort of necessarily espousing secret herbal remedies and this sort of thing. I mean, that may be part of a holistic approach, but you seem to be very, very nuts and bolts about, you know, basic things that any person can do without spending a lot of money to improve their lives.
Oh, absolutely, because you see, I always see health as a two-part sort of thing. That yes, you can pile a bunch of vitamins and minerals and whatever you do into the body, but if you don't find out what the leak is, what the drain is, if you don't find out what's actually causing the lack of energy, the depression, or the irritable bowel, or whatever, you know, the problem happens to be, it's not enough just to top the body up. In other words, it's like topping up a leaky boat. You've got to plug the hole. And so it's very important for people to make lifestyle changes. I don't care what treatment modality you're doing, if it's homeopathics, if it's acupuncture, if it's whatever modality you're using, you must take responsibility for your life and for your health. And one way of doing that is to look at, what am I eating, breathing, and drinking?
What about the person who's over-medicated? Maybe that's not even the right term, but let's just suppose someone has dealt with a lot of these problems. They've been going to the doctor, they've been doing supposedly all the right things, and they have a row of pills and various things that they're taking every day. They don't necessarily know at that point if that's part of the problem or part of the solution. How do you deal with that?
Well, that's a complicated issue because you hopefully will have an open physician that would be open to helping this person, even if they don't traditionally go along with, you know, whatever modality they're choosing, but just at least to support their journey. Now, there are more and more physicians who are able to do that, thank goodness. Regarding the medications, we encourage them to stay on the medications until we balance their diet and also balance some of the nutritional supplements. Then, along with their physician, they start to cut back very, very slowly on certain medications. And we've had excellent results.
Okay. What about the other things in the home environment? Read the Riot Act to me. Let's suppose you buy a new place. You know, you think maybe I live in an old house, it's got a lot of mold, it has lots of stuff. I'm going to move into a brand new apartment. Is that necessarily the good thing?
Well, a brand new apartment is tricky because you have less control. You've got all kinds of people living in that apartment complex with you. But at least the very thing you can do in your own unit is not to use chemicals for cleaning. It is so important. Open the windows regularly. Hopefully it's not in-floor radiant heat with new carpeting. That's so toxic.
That's bad news.
Oh, it's terrible. I know so many people who have ventured into that kind of an environment and they've become very ill because all these chemicals are outgassing as it's being heated. It's about the worst combination.
Well, that doesn't sound good.
No,
so
and maybe keeping it chemical free,
Mm-hmm.
keeping perhaps an air purifier, depending on what the person's condition is. If it's an airborne type of reactivity, then getting a very good air filter, at least in the bedroom. The bedroom is the most important room in the whole house because you spend a lot of time in there.
You have a picture in your book there on one of the pages of something called the total load theory. Perhaps you could explain that.
Yeah, the total load theory is basically imagine a barrel and all the things that assault the body in any given day, week, or month. For example, mercury amalgam fillings, 52% mercury. That's quite toxic to the body. Yeah, it goes right into the hazardous waste disposal unit. Now, not everybody is necessarily affected by these fillings, but, so it's not just the fillings. It's, for example, pesticiding your lawn 2-3 times a year and being in a neighborhood that routinely does that. It's eating junk food, eating out of the middle aisles of the grocery store. It's eating in fast food places. So it's a combination of many things that creates the problem. It's usually not just one thing. So it's long-term low-level exposure to many of these what we call allergens or toxins, really.
They're out there every place. It almost sounds like you can't get away from them entirely, but you can do your best to improve your situation.
You certainly can do your best. Yeah. Your diet, for example, eating on the periphery of the grocery store. Another wonderful step forward is to eat organically where you can. And again, for years, you know, when I lecture, I laugh and I think of people going, organic, wow, that's that hippy-dippy with the braided armpits. You know, what are they talking about? Organic is just pesticide-free. People don't realize that in Canada, for example, there are 40 allowable sprays on each apple. Think about it. Yeah. I mean, what does that do to the body? And there is no required labeling for this produce. So imagine if there was a whole list of all the potential pesticides that are on that apple or that banana, people wouldn't buy it.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
right.
would you? If you saw this list of things that you can't even pronounce, I tell people, if you can't pronounce it, don't eat it.
So sadly, I'm going down that aisle there. I'm picking up the apples and the Brussels sprouts and the broccoli and the cabbage. And in truth, I'm really loading up on a bunch of chemicals.
Well, you are, and you know, you have a liver. The liver takes you from cradle to grave. It's the same as the filter in the car. I say to people, you know, when's the last time you had a liver flush? Well, they look at me like, what are you talking about? And in actual fact, when you're constantly bombarding the body with additives, fillers, binders, shelf extenders, pesticides, you're going to have a problem inevitably, eventually.
Dare I ask what a liver flush is?
Liver flush is not fun, but there are many liver remedies. For example, silymarin, milk thistle, is a wonderful herb to take. It helps to restore the cells in the liver. So there are many things that people can do and to help themselves, which I mentioned a little bit.
Dandelion, isn't that on the list there?
Well, see, instead of spraying the dandelions,
yep.
you make dandelion tea or you make dandelion greens, and it will help your liver,
good
as long as it's not sprayed.
Okay, sounds good to me. What about the effects on children? Obviously, children are more vulnerable than adults to many of these
definitely
things.
are more vulnerable, and a lot of the book is focusing also on children, because children are growing, thriving, developing, maturing little people. And in the book I do mention things like in Puerto Rican studies of children eating tainted pork and chicken. Now that's not in Puerto Rico, it's here. And little girls developing breasts, pubic hair at the age of 8 and 9. I mean, how normal is this? This is becoming more and more of a phenomenon. Kids are growing up too quickly, physically maturing too soon.
And that's from chemicals put into the chickens, into the pork?
Yes, because those hormones. And the pesticides mimic hormones in the body, so they become xenoestrogens. So the body is bombarded by too many estrogens, and that's how it manifests, and they can be carcinogenic over a period of time. So we're looking at a very unusual phenomenon that wasn't there in our parents' and grandparents' day. I mean, even the cigarettes that our great-grandparents and great-grandfather would have smoked would have been organic tobacco. So again, we're looking at a very different picture. It's a very sad picture.
And of course, kids love that junk food. How do you convince them to eat something other than junk food?
Actually, we bribe them, and it's a wonderful way of doing it. Bribery really works, especially with teenagers, and we do have great success with children and teenagers. And what we do is we tell them, okay, and the teachers are on board now. So a lot of the teachers in the schools try a 10-day elimination type thing. Okay, no sugar, no pop, and let's see what happens, and no food colorings, and not to put anything in your mouth that you can't pronounce the words. And these kids, it's self-learning. They can't believe the problems that will clear. For example, their clarity in the classroom becomes much more acute. Their bowel problems, if they have them, their fatigue, they're able to function and focus, not just clarity, but their fatigue. Kids, 14, 15 years of age, they go to the corner store, the teachers tell them they can't teach them anymore. They're basically controlling their behavior. It's behavior management from that point on.
Very interesting. What about the breathing disorders? That seems to be almost epidemic in children across North America right now. Why is that?
It is. Well, there's definitely a correlation between breathing disorders, chronic ear infections in children, and smoking in the home, and also dairy products. There is no question. Because we've eliminated dairy products in some of these children. The parents are to smoke outside or not to smoke at all, and the improvement is amazing. It's astounding. And Time, People, all these magazines will put out, for example, articles on the horrible thing about asthma, and it's a front cover page of somebody with a mask, and they never ever mention diet. Never. Kids that are sensitive to food coloring, kids can even be sensitive to their own adrenaline. When you run or you exercise and all of a sudden you become short of breath.
So it's not just the air that we're breathing that happens to be polluted.
No, it can be an internal problem, but now there's new ways of adjusting those problems. So it's basically very workable.
Okay, well that's kind of encouraging. And in terms of pesticides, another one that's quite harmful to children, there have been some pretty important inroads made that people are stopping the use of pesticides, maybe at least on their lawns. Is there optimism?
Absolute optimism. People are making connections. And again, books like Free to Fly, there's many, many books on environmental health out on the marketplace, and people are really waking up. And I think too that they're making connections between the springtime. They think it's not always mold, it's the chemicals that are being sprayed. And if you live in a damp climate, for example, it's even worse because you have weather inversion patterns, you have the damp, so that the sun isn't there to off-gas it quickly, so that people can smell these things. And these pesticides stay on the lawn up to 6 weeks.
Yes, and dangerous stuff.
Very dangerous. And when you think of children, I mean, they don't read signs.
Right.
The pets don't read signs. They're walking around on the lawn, playing on the lawn. Then they carry these toxins, these pesticides into the home, which is wall-to-wall carpeting. And then you put the baby down on the carpet. It's not good.
Pretty scary. We don't want that to happen. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with our guest right after this. Welcome back to Off the Page. We're talking about health issues, environmental issues, all kinds of things with my guest today. If we step back from all the particulars for a minute, what's the mental discipline necessary for self-healing?
I think one has to experience enough discomfort in order to go to that place of healing, because if we're feeling fairly well, then we don't feel obviously a necessity to go to that place of healing. So discomfort, human nature. You have to feel unwell. You have to struggle a little bit before you make those changes. But
say I'm ready to make some kind of sacrifice to feel
absolutely,
better.
and that's part of the deal. I mean, nothing comes free, and I really believe that taking responsibility for your health. Like, what else is there? I mean, you can have all the money in the world, you can have everything going for you, but if you don't have your health, what have you got? And I think, again, making connections and asking, okay, why am I feeling this way? It brings to mind this elderly lady who came, and she had headaches for 40 years. For 40 years I had headaches, she tells me, and I go, ooh. I went through all my vows, I tested her, and the only thing that I could find was 1 cup of coffee that she was drinking every day. She gave up that 1 cup of coffee, and her 40-year headache is no longer.
Wow, that is an interesting
There's
story.
many of those stories.
Now you're a professional. Couldn't you put yourself out of business here by giving too much of the right advice in the book? Or
there's enough people. Let me tell you, there's
Yeah.
enough people that are feeling unwell. And again, I have to say that it's the young people that are really unwell, like chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, chronic candida. People think that these are just fad words, but they're very, very real. And often when people first walk into the office, they start to cry because they're validated, they're believed. And I think that that's the first step, is believing that, yes, this person believes you, and believing ultimately that you can heal, that you can be well. And which is, most of the people that work in my clinic, of course, too, have been ill themselves, so that's validation in itself, that we feel well now and that they know that there's hope.
Now, you're talking about the toxins in the food. I had the illusion at one point that the government was out there protecting me.
Well, the thing is, this goes back to the total load phenomenon, that when they test food additives and shelf extenders, etc. Now, we're talking about the bread that you can take to the cottage, leave it there for 3 weeks, and go back and have a nice fresh piece of bread. There's something wrong with that picture. It doesn't get moldy. So this is the type of thing, the additives, etc. And in actual fact, they test these things in isolation in a laboratory apart from human experience. In other words, if you, going back to the total load theory, if you pesticide your lawn and you're eating all kinds of junk, and you're living in a polluted environment, externally polluted environment, and you use chemicals in your home, etc., chances are that you're going to be more affected by these things. And there's no way that you can do a long-range study on how carrageenan or yellow dye number 5 is, that particular thing is affecting you. How can you do a study? You cannot. So these things are approved one at a time in isolation, not even in one lump sum, for example, in that white squishy bread that you're about to eat. Yeah. So it's a difficult, no, they're not protecting us.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
That too is scary. Now, in your book, you suggest that getting sick may actually be a good thing. It's a signal to do something healthy.
Yes, because there are many people who go through life who don't get these warning signs, and all of a sudden they drop dead, of a heart attack or an accident, or whatever may happen. For many people, they do have the signs. They have the opportunity to make that change in their lives so that they can live a full, vital, wonderful life. And there's so many people that come in, and even in my lectures, and they say, well, our doctor or their healthcare provider said, well, you're getting on to 40 and you're getting on to 50. I mean, what do you expect? Yeah. I know one thing, that the quality of my life and the quality of the lives of the people that we work with are far greater than even in their 20s and their 30s, and they could be in their 40s and 50s. The sad thing in one way is that, because also as the body heals, the mind heals. We're working at it from another perspective. There's the mind, body, body, mind. And we tend to work from the body because it's easier, it's tangible, it's gross matter. So working with the body to the mind, some of these people look back and they just cry out of joy and out of sadness at the same time, because they say, I can't believe how horrible I was to all those people. And the reason I was horrible is because I felt so unwell, but I didn't realize I was that unwell. Because you don't really realize how sick you are until you step out of that realm of illness and look back and go, well, I'm not even the same person. It can be very sad for some, and I say, listen, better late than never.
Yes. Now, we can go way back to the 1950s. Someone like Rachel Carson was alerting us to problems in the environment. There were poisons out there, and we were putting more poisons in. They were killing birds, they were killing animals, and catching up with us eventually. Other people were saying similar things about healthy foods, organic foods. Why have we been, in some ways, so slow to catch up with that reality that people have been telling us about for decades?
Well, because we tend to be a society of deniers. We don't like to look at the unpleasant. We like quick fixes. You know, we're the instant generation, myself included. And I think, too, that the problems were not reaching epidemic proportions, and I believe that they are now. I mean, putting tubes in kids' ears is an everyday affair. You know, they're lined up in hospitals waiting for their little operations. Parents are starting to question and going, what's going on? But also, the advent of heavy antibiotic use and abuse is also very much contributing to these illnesses. So people get a virus, they get a cold, they go down to the outpatient unit, they're given an antibiotic immediately. They're not even cultured half the time. I very much am critical of that whole approach to wellness and to health.
Well, we like the quick fix, right?
We do, but there's a consequence to everything. And anything that you tamper with, any nature that you tamper with, there's going to be consequences. And people are starting to realize that because they're experiencing the ill effects of these quick fixes.
How often do you think that we're duped into thinking that we're eating healthy, but we're not?
Well, that's a difficult question. Actually, through commercials, kids are duped every minute.
Yes.
I mean, you know, they believe that Fruit Loops.
It's all good for you. Right?
Oh, it's all good for you. Of course. You have the images, you know, that healthy person. You have milk mustache commercials. Now they've even got physicians on with milk mustaches. I mean, really, you have to look at the reality. So yes, we're duped, but people are questioning more and more. They really are.
Well, that's good. And we're going to take a very short break, and we'll be back with Judith right after this. Watching Off the Page today. My guest is Judit Rajhathy, and a couple final things here. How did you get involved in this field to begin with?
I became very ill. Illness is the best teacher. Obviously, people ask me, are you Jillian in the book? And I say, well, of course, there's a part of me that's Jillian, because the feelings, the not being validated, the not being believed, and the havoc that it played with my family, my children, my husband, etc. Yes, so I became very ill. I had to find my way out of it, because there were people who helped me along the way, just like people are helping Jillian along the way. But ultimately, the lesson in it for me is that I am my own healer. And that, yes, there were people that contributed to that healing and that journey, but ultimately it was my responsibility.
And you run into unhealthy, unhappy people all the time because of your profession. If you had like 30 seconds with one person who grabbed you on the street and said, you know all this stuff, tell me one thing I can do to improve my health, what would you say?
Clean up your diet immediately. Drink lots and lots of clean water. And eliminate the things that you totally are addicted to, that you love the most, because allergy, addiction are the same, basically the same thing.
Sad but true. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for watching Off the Page. I'll see you again next time.